Great, and welcome back to our last session of today's conference. Thank you for all being part of our Frontline Network annual conference today. It's been a really brilliant and quite tiring day, but I hope it's been useful for people. It's been nice to see some familiar faces and meet some people for the first time. We've been talking in preparation for our last panel session about hoping in the future that we can do this in person. And let's just perhaps have a moment to think, well, this will be our last online conference, and next year we'll find somewhere to get together in person. That'd be a great thing. That'd be a great thing to do. We've got about 45 minutes or so for this last session. Our theme has been all about working together today. All our sessions have carried that theme, and we've heard a real range of speakers contributing to what frontline workers are doing. I've had the privilege of being able to kind of earwig in to some of those, and just three things that really stuck with me today. One question that was asked to attendees of one of the sessions was, how often are you assisting your clients where their income doesn't cover their outgoings? And guess what? It was the majority of people that people are working with at the moment. A little hint at the extent of the cost of living position that we find ourselves in. Another thing that came through really strongly was, our theme was working together, but co-production and co-working across the sector really came out as a strong theme as a way of overcoming some of those barriers that frontline workers face on a day-to-day basis. And then I heard another kind of whisper all about the continuing need for suitable housing, particularly housing that's trauma-informed and gender-specific, and that gap around provision of housing for women with complex needs seems to be a thing we've talked about for many times, but still a presenting issue. So if you missed any of the sessions today, what you can do is you can go back to the Frontline Network website. We'll post every session up there as soon as we can, and we'll let you know when they are up and available. So our final session is really a discussion, and I'm really thrilled to have four significant people in housing and homelessness, people who understand some of the issues that we've been talking about today. And we're just going to have a kind of natter for the last half hour or so about working together and some reflections on that. We have people from all four nations, and I'm not going to introduce them. I'm going to let them do that themselves. And they've been prepared that they're going to do this, and they're not going to go on for too long, so that we can spend more time talking and listening to them. Firstly, Carl.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Not sure how prepared I am, but thanks. Really glad to be here. So my name's Carl Brown. I am a systems practice manager from the Making Every Adult Matter Coalition. I'll just say a little bit about the coalition. So it's a coalition of the three national charities, Clinks, Mind and Homeless Link, and of course the representatives from all three of those here today. And also there's an associate member, Collective Voice. And our whole ethos really at MEAM is about working together, so very fitting for the discussion today, I think. I'll probably leave it at that, Tim, as you said, to keep.
That's perfect. Thank you, Carl. Sian.
Hi, I'm Sian Aldridge, and I'm the Director of Services and Support for the Wallich, which is a Welsh homelessness charity, a proud Welsh homelessness charity. So yeah, we've been in existence since the late 1970s, and we operate a range of services right across Wales, from outreach through to accommodation services, and right through to sort of employment training, creative arts and engagement. I've worked there for 14 years, and I started on the front line myself, working on outreach for about 6 years.
Thank you. And Lorrraine.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm delighted to be with you. I'm Lorrraine McGrath. I'm Chief Exec of Sian Community Scotland. We are the largest specialist provider of homelessness services in Scotland. We work with between 6,000 and 7,000 people a year across a wide range of provision, from specialist street outreach to accommodation to actually now being in a position to provide people with settled homes as well, which we're delighted about. And I'm really pleased to be joining you.
Thank you. And Brenda, last but by no means least.
Thanks, Tim. I'm also delighted to be here today. I'm Brenda Parker. I'm Advice Services Manager with an organisation in Northern Ireland called Housing Rights. And Housing Rights is the lead provider of independent housing advice in Northern Ireland. We've been in existence since the 60s. We work in various areas, well, first of all, geographically throughout Northern Ireland, but we have, helpline, first point of contact for people and agencies in Northern Ireland. Plus we have various project work. And some of that I think is particularly relevant to today, and that's within our prisons project that we help develop and deliver. Also, we have a project with our Community Housing Advice Project, which works with all of the generalist advice agencies out there to build capacity within them. And I think that area of our work is very relevant as well. And we've worked with our ethnic minority communities, building capacity there and building partnerships with the various groups there. So none of what we do would be as successful as it has been to the degree that it has if we weren't working effectively together. That's me.
Brilliant. Thank you, Brenda. So I would just say to our panel before we kind of came online that, with this can be a conversation and we might ask questions of one another, but we're really interested to explore what working together as organizations can and does look like and some of the barriers to that. So my first question, I wonder, Brenda, that you're probably just picking on what you were saying. Good to start with you. What does working together effectively look like for you in your organization and where you're sat today, maybe across your teams or across the services that you're involved with, or across your region down across in Northern Ireland?
Well, Tim, essentially it means having built trusted relationships with organisations outside of our own. If I look at the prisons project as a start, we're strapped for time, so we'll not go into a great deal of detail, but way back 2005, 2006, we as a small voluntary organisation were asked to go in and provide a service in our prisons. Clearly, that's not possible to do effectively without working together with key organisations, both statutory and voluntary. So part of that work from the very inception involved looking at the objectives of each one of those organisations, seeing the similarities and the links between them, and then having a piece of work to work together in order to achieve what needed to be achieved, which was basically that fundamental right of everyone in prisons having access to good quality housing advice and advocacy, and ensuring that we prevented homelessness and alleviated homelessness where possible. So a small organisation couldn't do that. We were very clear from the outset that we needed to work together collaboratively and in partnership with statutory as well as voluntary organisations in order to begin to look at what needed to be done, who needed to do it, around what timescales. Over a period of time, we developed a protocol of work which outlined that all of those things, all of those elements in terms of what needs to be done, who needs to do it within each of the agencies, and at what timescale does it need to be done in order to achieve the objectives. So that's a big picture of what we were trying to do. As we've gone on since then, we work daily in most of our projects, and all of our projects, in fact, with agency staff that are agency and organisation staff that are outside of our own organisation. So there's shared knowledge, shared learning. It's in the best interest of all of our clients not to work in a silo, because if we're working within a silo, we're going to miss something. So again, back to the prisons work that we do, which I think is maybe the key area of our work that I should talk about today. And in terms of the support of our staff within that, our staff that were working in the prisons were very involved in the development of what works and what doesn't work, as well as the staff of the other organisations. We met regularly, we discussed those things, we looked at what worked, we looked at what didn't work, we looked at interventions that we could all work within in order to achieve the objectives. So there was a big level of buy-in from the various different organisations, from the staff on the ground, the frontline staff, because their contributions were making a difference. We're bringing about changes to how we work. So many advantages to that sort of the work that we did, and we're still doing. The overall aim of the service is to achieve our objectives, and that's best achieved when everybody is involved.
Lorrraine, I was interested to see how that resonates with what you're doing up in Scotland, because I think there might be some resonance there.
There absolutely is, particularly that trusted relationships. I think that's because that's the basis for all good partnerships, is trust. I think I'm sitting in the embodiment of that right now, in terms of, this is our access hub in Glasgow. There are 38 organisations who work with us alongside here, and there is a crisis response service. And I think the key to that is, for me, that whilst we enjoy all sorts of different partnerships and collaborations, some of which have a huge amount of governance and a huge amount of bureaucracy wrapped around it, this doesn't. What this has and what this does is create the space for individual leadership at all levels, and create space for that trusted relationship building, particularly at the front line. So it is all predominantly frontline staff that work in this access hub, 38 organisations who are achieving incredible things on a day-by-day basis, with 80 to people every day coming through the door. The rapid response that we're able to facilitate, make happen and connect with here is phenomenal, and it has no bureaucracy and it has no significant governance arrangements wrapped around it. What it has is the space and empowerment for frontline staff to build relationships with each other and to work out together the best response, person by person, system by system, day by day. And we're constantly learning from that in terms of making improvements to the system, making improvements to the resources that are available. But the key thing is that they are able to act on the spot with each other, and they are trusting each other and respecting each other's roles and responsibilities and gifts to bring. And it's just phenomenal to watch, and it isn't because there's anything that clever wrapped around it. It's just allowed to happen. It's allowed is the wrong word. It's supported, it's encouraged, it's fed, it's a space that's created. And I think for me, that's probably one of the most remarkable things that I've seen happen in the last few years, and that we all seen happen at the start of COVID, where professional boundaries, professional hierarchies, the usual blockages of protocols and pathways and systems were kind of not completely ignored, but swept aside.
Beginning to, yeah. That's fascinating.
And held in a different space in terms of, well, how do we apply that, but get things done.
Well, we'll swing back to that in a moment, because 38 organisations in the same place sounds like, potentially really difficult to manage.
Yeah.
And all kinds of competition and things to be dealt
happen.
with. Well, we'll come back to it in a moment. Carl, what does that resonate again with you, and what you see as effectiveness in working together?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in particular the points around trusting relationships, I think that's clear, and has certainly come up multiple times throughout today. But also, as Lorrraine stated there, I think frontline staff are absolutely crucial to this work, really. In many ways, they are the experts in all of this stuff. They sort of live it and experience the harsh realities of the system every day. And if you are on the front line, you're constantly trying to fix things or work around things that have gone wrong elsewhere often. And so sort of drawing on that experience and knowledge in order to improve things at a sort of, it's a system, a systematic level is absolutely crucial. And that means that we have to ensure that the infrastructure is in place for those conversations and that learning to take place, which sounds similar to what Lorraine's discussing there. But in the way that we do it within the Making Every Adult Matter Coalition, it's probably worth saying that we recently just wrapped up a 5-year national lottery funding stream. And so as part of that, we published a reflections report, which is available on our website. And so that funding stream allowed us to work with a network of 40 local areas across the country to help deliver systems change for people experiencing multiple disadvantage. And what we found within that is that MEAM partnerships differ widely, we found, from other multi-agency type partnership approaches. And I think that's to do with 3 things really. So first of all, and perhaps most importantly, co-production is absolutely central to our work, and involving the lived experience voice is absolutely baked in to the approach at every stage. And that includes the sort of the planning, designing and delivering system change. And so secondly, we seek to build a broad alliance that operates across the breadth and the depth of a local system. So where sort of traditional approaches to multi-agency partnerships typically involve representatives at a certain level, a certain tier within an organisation, often at a strategy level. In the Making Every Adult Matter Coalition, we seek to build what I call a sort of an accountability framework that allows for shared learning at different levels, involving frontline workers, service managers, strategic managers and commissioners, and of course, people with lived experience. And then thirdly, I think it's something to do with sort of creating that shared purpose and the vision for change. And I think you can bring people together from across multiple sectors and collectively focus on the needs of the person and what you need to do to achieve that, and it just works better for everyone in that sense. So.
Thank you, Carl. And Sian, what's effective working together looking like in Wales? And are there any examples that you might draw to us where it is working really, really very well?
Yeah, there's one great example actually, just picking up on what Carl, Lorraine and Brenda said. So at the beginning of the pandemic, so back in May 2020, obviously there was the policy to get everybody into safe accommodation. And it just shows what a public health emergency can do, because in 6 weeks in partnership, there was ourselves, another homeless organisation, the local authority and housing association in 6 weeks opened up a hostel to try and help alleviate the pressures of the pandemic. So I think Lorraine mentioned around the bureaucracy sometimes getting in the way of being able to collaborate to deliver a partnership project. And I think that was a great example really of actually when that's moved out of the way, what can be achieved in a very, very short space of time. It's about, and Carl just said about shared purpose and shared vision and shared values. We all wanted the same thing and we made sure that we got behind it and we made it happen. So it shows it can happen when we get out of our way. And I think just thinking about partnerships on the ground, I think Carl said that our frontline workers are the best at doing that because they're working with the people. They want the best outcomes for those individuals. So they'll draw in those resources and the specialists that we all know we have to have. We have to have representatives from all different organisations to help us. And I think we can learn lessons to that they just get the job done, they do what it takes. And I think perhaps we need to look at that, from a commissioning perspective and a strategic perspective, because, ultimately we're here to help people lead happy lives. And I think we do that in partnership. And then one other point I wanted to make on something, I think Carly said you had lottery funding. What really interesting, we've just entered into some lottery funding called the Helping End Homelessness programme. And what they did, there was a requirement for partnership working, which we often see in contracts, but what we don't often see is they gave 6 months for developing those partnerships. Yeah. They helped to bring those people together. So there were lots of smaller charities, larger charities who were brought together by the lottery, and then they resourced it. So there was a development grant available because we know that it costs money and time to bring those meaningful partnerships together. So that was a great example and it worked extremely well. to allow the sort of time and space to develop those meaningful partnerships, to get all the agreements in place so that when we start to deliver in partnership, everybody knows what everybody's doing. So I thought there were a couple of great examples to highlight maybe what my colleagues here were saying.
That's really helpful. I'm really interested in that point about how you can tell when a partnership is being genuinely effective, because often when you build a partnership, a commissioner or a funder will say, well, this needs to be about partnership working. So you kind of put all the rivalries and all the loathing and all the competition to one side long enough to get the money. And then when you get the money, it can all kind of fall apart a little bit again at that point, and all those old things come back into play again. And I'd be really interested to see how a genuine partnership overcomes some of those things, which, you know, sometimes they're very human ways of working. It's not people intentionally being getting in the way, but they want the best for their organization. And you know, when can you really tell it's a genuine working partnership?
I think it's when you have the space to develop that partnership into something that's what we all need, the sort of formal agreements to understand what our place and our responsibilities are. So I think when there's clear lines of responsibilities within a partnership, everybody knows what they're doing. Because as you said, nobody means for things to go wrong in that. But I think as long as you've got the infrastructure to support that partnership, you've got a steering group that's overseeing it, the governance of that partnership is strong. And I think that's what we need to see more in commission services, the ability to bring that in, because as you say, everybody wants us to work in partnership, but it's not necessarily always the environment to do that safely, because it is a risk for an organisation sometimes to enter into that. So people need to feel safe within that partnership, that they'll be, you know, that they know exactly what their responsibilities are. So yeah, again, I think a lot of lessons learned from how the National Lottery did that recently in Wales. I'm not sure if they did it across any of the other nations, but it certainly worked well.
Oh, was that your similar experience with the lottery funding work that you were doing as well, giving that time to build a partnership and then put in place effective mechanisms to make it work?
Yeah, I think so, absolutely. I think that time is certainly a key point, really. I think that your initial question was around how do we know if partnerships work, and I think that often comes down to the length of time of a partnership and actually what happens when the money dries up. You know, if there's no money that goes into those partnerships, and there's different elements of the work within the way that we operate within Making Every Adult Matter. So in some areas where we seek to build different partnerships and different approaches to systems change, there is no money that goes alongside that. There's the support that goes alongside, but there's no money. And you know, I think that we did find over the past 5 years that in contrast to some areas where there was an injection of finance as well, actually those areas that didn't have money in some areas that operated at, you know, perhaps in a more meaningful way, I think, and created more sustainable outcomes. So you know, which demonstrates that it's not always about the finances. You know, I think that, you know, it is about developing those trusting relationships, being able to challenge one another and being able to fail, you know, and explore where those sort of where those failures have come from, and being able to take those risks, which isn't easy in this sector. You know, it's very risk averse, especially for the statutory sector. But you know, I think that yeah, just creating those creative spaces, you know, which can be challenging, of course, with the commissioning models and everything else we have, which are sort of often built on you know, free market principles, let's say, you know, around competition and competitiveness and everything else. So so there certainly can be challenges there, but nonetheless, we do see some. I think ultimately, when it comes down to that shared purpose, we realise that nobody really goes into this line of work for the money. Let's say, you know, they're doing it because they're passionate about driving change, and I think that you can bring it down to that shared purpose and focus the minds, and yeah, people really sort of pull together then and seek to drive change. And the example that Lorrraine gave of you know, during the pandemic, I think, when there was that little bit more flexibility built in, and you know, people were able to just go where the energy is and where the passions is, and get the job done. So
yeah, and Lorrraine, are you seeing some of those lessons that you learned from the pandemic just continuing those embedded ways of working, you know, because I wonder if system change does often begin with a change in a relationship and a way of working, which happened by, you know, in spades during the pandemic, but whether or not those relationships have been maintained and continuing to work. I'm interested.
I think absolutely, particularly in the two main cities in Glasgow and Edinburgh, there's been a huge amount of action and learning and trust and respect, newfound respect for different parts of the system, particularly the voluntary sector. And a kind of just a realisation that if we do just let people get on with it and give them the space to get on with it, and we get, I think Sian said, if we get out of our own way, then we can maintain that. And you know, we've had remarkable outcomes in both cities.
Yeah.
You know, Glasgow's down to single numbers of chronic rough sleeping, and Edinburgh's in the middle teens. That's, you know, it's taken a lot of energy to maintain that.
Absolutely.
We still have high rates of resolution every single week, but that's phenomenal. That wouldn't be possible to have achieved or maintain without that. I think in terms of when partnerships do work well, I would maybe cite another example that we've been involved in, which was a piece of work that's like MEAM, that was focused on the people of most concern in Glasgow, and we had a 3-tier system for that. There was the only additional money that we got was to fund a facilitator role, a coordinator role, like yourself or your team, Carol. You know, that sat in between the organisations and didn't report, although we employed them, they didn't report to us, they reported to the steering group. And we had, and that was important, because that meant that there was an objectivity and the learning was able to be passed without any sense of ownership or you know, it's ours, it's our outcome, it's, you know, that allowed for the collective sense, because she managed that for us and made sure that that was the case. But I go back to the fact that we had a key worker group, we had a resource manager group and a steering group, and all the magic happened at the key worker group.
Yeah.
And those were all people just doing their everyday jobs that they were already in before the initiative. And they were empowered by each of their employers to say, go make it happen. Whatever's going to work for that person, go make it happen. The resource managers group would then learn from the key worker group about where the resources were best deployed and what changes they could make to that to keep things going, which was a learning culture. And then they brought whatever system change that learning from working with working with the people that we were working with, the 50 odd people that we worked with at the time, to the steering group, and we got to make the system change. We could go, okay, we're the decision makers at a system level and we can make the system change. And it was just happening really organically. And that was the precursor to the hub that I'm in just now. But I think that having some independence in the middle, you know, managing the delivery, but critically, I come back to let the guys go on with it, put them together and let them go on with it.
Exactly.
Because they don't have the organisational identity issues. They don't have the, oh, wait a minute, you know, will that risk bad funding? They don't have any of that. They just have a person in front of them that they want to help.
Exactly. Jean Templeton in our opening session this morning said, you know, frontline workers, you're the people who know what's working. And it's just so important that we kind of draw that through. Barbara, in Northern Ireland then, have you got an example there? Because is it very similar in the context that you're working with the prison systems, or is there something else that you draw in building these strong, effective working relationships with people?
Well, there are various examples, but I think the strongest one from my perspective is the prisons work that we have done, because that is quite unique in that the partnership is within all of our relevant statutory agencies. For instance, our statutory housing body, the Housing Executive, the Northern Ireland Housing Executive, the Prison Service, the Probation Board. We work along with the Health and Social Care Trusts, but they're not in partnership with us as yet. but importantly, all of the relevant voluntary organisations as well. And just to go back to your question, Tim, about how do we measure and how do we recognise positive outcomes from partnerships? And I would completely agree that it's about systematic change. Are those sustainable? Are those systematic changes sustainable? Have we built long-term and trusting relationships between each other? And trusting relationships to the point where we can comfortably challenge each other. But I would also say that staff in all of our organisations are have very heavy caseloads and underswamped. So I would have concerns about the priorities that each of our organisations have. And when you think particularly around those of the people we work with who have the most complex needs, who may be viewed as difficult to engage when it comes to partnership working and agreed protocols, etc., unless there is some level of duty within a partnership, some of our most vulnerable people will maybe fall through the net.
I think that's right. And I think partnership working is difficult and complicated. And I think there are some real significant barriers to this. And you've really kind of hit on one there, where you've got people with very, very specific and complex needs, not necessarily fitting in to a simple system, a simple way of working. So, those barriers extend elsewhere. I'm just wondering if each of you might be able to comment on what you think are the real significant barriers to this way of working and to building effective partnerships. Sian, do you want to kick us off? Or?
Yeah, I think something comes straight to mind is around how services are commissioned. We need commissioned services across housing, health, criminal justice, because and to have the funding stream from each of those sort of portfolios right at that sort of commissioned level, because I think that's one of the biggest things I would ask for in terms of system change there, because we know, all of us know, that homelessness isn't just about housing, and until we have properly commissioned services across the breadth of those portfolios, that's what people need so that they can access appropriate support through a partnership working. So I think that's a barrier for me. A lot of the statutory contracts that come out really want partnerships, but whether or not it's the infrastructure is there to deliver that properly, it is another matter. So yeah, it's always, for me, it's about drawing in sort of particularly in health at the moment with mental health, and the difficulty in accessing those services. And we do work in partnership on the ground with people, but again, I think there's still, for us, there's a disparity between the voluntary sector and the housing, homelessness, and the statutory health sector, and bringing those together would really, really make such a difference.
Absolutely. Carl, does that resonate with you in England as well? Is that?
Yeah, absolutely. In particular around the challenge around commissioning. I think I mentioned this earlier. It's often based upon an ideology of competitiveness, which sort of stifles collaboration, as you've said, and this sort of creates complications around sharing and working together. Because organisations, and I think the Jean pointed to this morning as well, around organisations believe in themselves, and so they want to win contracts and get the money, basically, and that sort of gets in the way sometimes of working well together. In addition to some of those other issues that Sian mentioned, I think that there's other barriers are sometimes around the changing context that we have to operate within. So, changing policies, for example. And again, I think Nadine pointed to this morning as well, around sort of different policies coming through. So you've got the welfare reform, right to buy, and all of these different policies that come through that have sort of unintended consequences. Some say they're unintended, some may say that they're more, intended, but nonetheless, we have these policies which mean that we're constantly sort of working in a changing environment, which creates all the barriers. And then one perhaps that hasn't been mentioned is one around staff turnover, I think, and it perhaps relates a little bit to what Brenda mentioned, just around having heavy caseloads and effectively being underappreciated and undervalued in this sector. You know, it's a problem across the sector, most definitely. And this work, as we've already pointed to, is about relationships. It's about collaboration. You know, and that depends on strong, trusting, respectful sorts of relationships, and for them to be established and nurtured. And you know, when somebody leaves an organisation or a partnership, that can lead to some significant setbacks, really. I'll perhaps leave it there, but if we could turn back to that point, perhaps in a moment, just around staff sort of well-being and everything, that'd be useful as well. But yeah, probably leave it there for the partnerships.
Yeah, I'm looking at the clock and thinking we've got so much that I'd love to talk about. We have to squeeze in. Lorrraine, what about from your perspective?
I certainly think commissioning programs never give space or life to the amount of resource that it takes to do partnerships well.
Yeah.
They often over-specify, and also I'm wholeheartedly in support of outcomes-based commissioning, but when that's performance-related, then that affects partnership working as well, because then everybody's trying to manage that, and the eye is on the wrong ball, and it really stifles a learning culture. I also think one of the other things, again, and it's a resource restraint, is our ability to really have learning partnerships and a learning culture within partnerships that's based on good information, good data, good understanding. And again, we're very seldom resourced to be able to have the systems that we need to feed that. And the more complex the partnership, like the one that Brenda's describing, the greater need for really good quality information, both qualitative and quantitative. It's really important, but we're very seldom resourced to be able to do that well, and therefore learn together and grow together and develop together. Because I think when the information's really good, it's irrefutable. You sit around and you go, right, you know, it's a bit like having the person in front of you.
Absolutely, yeah.
Just get around the information together rather than the kind of the normal push and pull.
Exactly. We're nearly out of time, so I'm going to put you all on the spot, just to make a little concluding comment. I'm going to ask you to do this I don't quite know what order yet. I'll decide in a moment. But you know, we have today a conference which is for frontline staff, those people working directly on the ground, and we're encouraging them to, well, look beyond themselves and work together more effectively. So just imagine for a moment, team, that you're looking at a whole group of frontline workers from right across the UK. What would be your message to them to encourage them from tomorrow to just put this way of working effectively together at the forefront of their minds? Who wants to go first? Carl looked up. Brenda, you caught my eye.
Oh dear. Okay, well, I suppose we have to think about, and I'll do this quickly because I know we're running out of time. I suppose we have to realize that all of us are in this sector because we want to help. And in fact, when you look at the impact that we have on the people that we work with, it's immeasurable. Partnership working is difficult to establish well, but it is absolutely essential to continue to provide that level of service to all of the people that we work with. We should never view ourselves or work within a silo, because then we're restricting the service that we're providing to the people who need us. My final point then is to those frontline workers. I have been one myself for many, many years. I know the difficulties that people are faced with. I know the hardships and the trauma that people can experience. But I would say that the benefits are looking at proper partnership working and delivering proper effective services to people who really need it, within the trusted relationships, and no better people to build trusted relationships than people within our sector on the front lines.
Brilliant, thank you. Lorrraine.
Oh, another question. We have a bit of a mantra here that it's make it easy, make it right, make it happen. So I would say that would be my kind of strapline to offer to every frontline worker. trusted relationships are critically important. Trust yourself first. Trust that you do know how to make it easy, make it right, make it happen. Focus on making it easy for the other organisations that you need to work alongside you as
Brilliant.
well. Invest in that, and use your own agency to lead in that relationship as often as you possibly can, by making it possible for others to step alongside you and come with you. And
Very
sometimes
nice.
that's hard because you might feel it's all unjust and unfair, but keep the eye on the prize around the person that you're trying to support as well.
Thank you. Have we got a conference theme for next year? I think we almost have. That was just great. Sian.
Yeah, I'll pull on one of our values, which is community. So I think we're all here because we want to end homelessness. And I think to do that, we need a community response to that. And we're all part of that community wherever we work within the sector. And particularly for those on the ground, to pull that community response together around the person that we're trying to support. And I think, if Lorrraine just said, if we always have our eyes on that individual and what their future looks like, then we can't go far wrong. We'll pull the resources needed and we'll work with the people we need to work with to enable that to happen. So yeah, community response to homelessness. And I think always using your opportunities when you're working frontline to influence change, whether that's public perception, whether that's working within business communities, whether that's going shopping and you've got an opportunity to sort of talk about homelessness and make sure that, you know, it's everybody's responsibility to help and to hopefully end homelessness across the UK.
Brilliant, thank you. Last word to Carl.
Yeah, I've had some time to think, and I'm still having some difficulties with the question. I think that I certainly agree with the points being made. Something that occurs to me though, yeah, something that occurs to me. I'm going to be a little bit provocative if I can. But we're here, we're celebrating the frontline work. We recognise the value in that work. I think that's come out through the message with all of us. But something struck me this morning when Jean Templeton was speaking, and she mentioned a recent report which stated that 65% of those on the front line working in this sector felt that their role had a negative impact on their well-being. So this, 65%, that's, 2/3 of everyone who does this work, and that should be a pandemic in this sector, really. And reading stats like that should be earth-shattering to us all. There's issues around job security, which we're all aware of. There's issues around feeling valued and pay. We're currently living through a cost of living crisis. As I've said, nobody really goes into this work because of the money, but we do it because we care. But it's difficult to care when you're concerned about your own bills and your kids' school uniforms and everything else. And at its core, this work is about social justice, I feel, and our organisations are all social justice organisations. And pay, working conditions, that these are central things to social justice. So any advice would probably be unionise. There's a bit of a movement going on. Let's build a movement and let's change the sector for the better, really. I just wanted to be a little bit provocative, but I agree with all the other points made as well.
Not at all. There's applause moving up the screen as you say that, Carl, so thank you. But it is why we have a Frontline Network. It's what the St Martin's Frontline Network is there to do, to listen and provide a voice for frontline workers and hear some of those issues so we can build a community and begin to share with one another the things that work, but the things that we need as well in order to work in this sector and to do what we do. Hey, thank you so much. We have absolutely run out of time. It's been great to have the four of you to chat. I wish we'd got longer. I always think, you get to the end of this, you never quite give yourselves enough time, but it's been a long day. So I am going to draw a conclusion and bring today to an end. We have got a Mentimeter kind of evaluation piece, which I think will appear in the chat. Oh, hang on, it's appearing on the screen. Here we go. That was very exciting. I didn't know that was going to happen. So it's the usual thing. If you go to mentimeter.com or scan the QR code, the number there, 8943153. And we'd really like to hear your feedback on today, but also think about what you're going to do as a as a result of today. For those of you who've attended, just have a little think and fire a few words on there. Today, this is what I'm going to do as a result of being part of this. Now, we've got a few ideas arriving already on the screen. So while you do that, my just final comments are to say thank you once again to our panel. Thank you to Jean this morning for clicking off our first session, which was so important to get the day started. Thank you to everyone who's led our workshops and all our sessions. And thank you to the team here, particularly Amanda and Naomi, who've put together yet again a spectacularly good day. Anything you've missed, go to the website in the next couple of days and you'll be able to watch it again or catch up with anything that you missed. And I'm going to say this with conviction, I really hope to see people in person next year when we can get together once more. Thank you. Oh, there's one more slide. I've been told there's another one more slide. What does this one say? Recommend the Frontline network to colleagues. Yeah, would you do that? If you agree, click on here quickly, and then we'll know that people are there that we want to know. It's doing quite well at the moment. How long dare I give it, team? I've got to give it another 30 seconds. Click away if you've not been able to do it. I think it stays up there for a while after we finished, so we don't have to say. Great. Thank you, everybody. Let's end it there, and we'll see you soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.